Darkness owned the mountain. The kind of cold, absolute darkness that existed 2 miles above sea level, where even starlight struggled to penetrate the thin air, where breathing hurt and every movement cost twice the energy it should. Elena Thorne's world had contracted to a circle of glass. Through the Schmidt and Bender scope, magnified 12 times, she could see the heat signature of a man who didn't know he had 90 seconds left to live. 2,400 meters, just under a mile and a half. The target sat in a stone compound, backlit by a cooking fire, completely unaware that death was studying him through German optics from a ridge he'd never seen. Her breathing had slowed to 6 breaths per minute. Her heart rate held steady at 52 beats. The cold bit through her ghillie suit, but she'd stopped feeling it an hour ago. Cold was just information now, data to calculate into the shot. Beside her, Captain Marcus Hale worked the spotting scope with movements so economical they barely disturbed the air. 36 years old, 14 years in the teams, and a legend even among legends. He'd taught her everything that mattered: how to read wind and darkness by watching the stars shimmer, how to find the stillness between heartbeats where the rifle became an extension of thought rather than tool. "Wind 270 at 12, Hale whispered, voice barely audible even 6 inches away. "Temperature falling, target stationary. You've got this, Ghost." Ghost, her call sign, earned not because she was quiet, though she was, but because her targets never heard her coming. Neither did anyone else. She'd learned young that silence was power, that words were distractions that got people killed, that the space between speaking and shooting was where mistakes lived. Elena made micro-adjustments to the Mk13 Mod 7. The .300 Winchester Magnum had been built for this. 220 grains of Sierra Match King hollow point, hand-loaded to perfection. Muzzle velocity 2,900 feet per second. At this distance, the bullet would drop nearly 60 feet. Time of flight, 2.8 seconds. Long enough for the Earth to rotate beneath a round. Long enough for wind to shove it 3 feet left if she miscalculated by even half a mile per hour. She dialed in elevation, 32 minutes of angle. Her fingers moved with the certainty of 10,000 repetitions. Windage, 4.2 mils right. The numbers weren't guesses. They were physics made personal. Through the scope, the target lifted a radio. Intel said his name was Khalid Mansour, Taliban logistics commander, the man who'd orchestrated 3 IED attacks that killed 9 Marines and 2 Navy corpsmen. He was talking to someone, animated, gesturing with his free hand. He had no idea this was his last conversation. Elena's finger took up slack on the trigger. First stage clean, moving into second stage with pressure so gradual it was almost geological. Her universe narrowed to crosshairs and breathing and the space between heartbeats where the rifle spoke. One sharp crack that rolled across the Hindu Kush like distant thunder. Muzzle flash bloomed for 1/10 of a second, immediately swallowed by the flash suppressor. 2.8 seconds of flight time while she stayed on the glass, tracking. The target jerked, dropped. The radio fell from his hand, and the cooking fire cast strange shadows as his body collapsed. "Hit," Hale confirmed. "Center mass. Beautiful work, Ghost." Elena worked the bolt, smooth, mechanical. The brass ejected with a musical ping against the rocks. She chambered another round and swept the compound, looking for secondary targets, looking for threats, looking for... "Contact left!" Hale's voice exploded from whisper to urgent. Multiple tangos, 7 o'clock, 200 meters in closing, where the world detonated into chaos. Muzzle flashes erupted from positions they'd missed, positions that shouldn't have been there, positions that Intel had cleared as empty. PKM machine gun fire tore through the air above them, with that distinctive ripping sound that meant Soviet-era hardware and men who knew how to use it. They'd walked into an ambush. The target had been bait. They'd been so focused on the shot that they'd missed the trap closing around them. "Fall back!" Hale's hand grabbed her ghillie suit, yanking her back from the ridgeline as rounds chewed apart the rocks where her head had been 2 seconds earlier. Move, move, move! Elena scrambled backward, dragging the MK-13, her mind racing through scenarios. How many shooters? Where was the assault team? Where was exfil? The radio crackled with voices, all of them urgent, all of them shouting over each other. Hale was already on the scope again, scanning. Northeast ridge, 500 meters. I've got muzzle flash, secondary position. They're flanking. The laser designator sweep appeared before the sound. A thin red line that painted across Hale's chest for maybe a quarter second. Elena saw it, saw Hale's eyes widen with recognition, saw him twist toward her, saw him push her. The round hit Hale before the sound of the shot arrived. Supersonic, 7.62 by 54 rimmed, Russian sniper rifle. The bullet entered just below his vest's armored plate, found the gap, and tore through everything important. Blood exploded across the rocks, across Elena's face, across everything. No! The word ripped from her throat, but Hale was already falling, already gone even though his eyes were still open, still aware, still trying to tell her something. She caught him. His weight collapsed into her arms and the blood was hot against her hands. Too hot, too much. Her training kicked in automatically. Pressure, direct pressure on the wound. Pack it with gauze. Apply pressure. Stop the bleeding. Stop. But there was no stopping this. The round had severed his femoral artery and maybe nicked the abdominal aorta, and he was bleeding out faster than physics should allow. Finish it. His hand clamped onto her wrist with shocking strength. His voice bubbled through blood. Northeast ridge, 2,800 meters, silent protocol. Finish. The light went out of his eyes. Just like that. 1 second, Marcus Hale was the best shooter she'd ever known, and the next second he was weight in her arms and blood on her hands and a promise she had to keep. Elena laid him down gently. Her hands shook. Her whole body shook. But some distant part of her mind, the part Hale had trained, the part that lived in the space between thought and action, was already moving. She grabbed his MK-13, heavier than hers, different zero, but she'd shot it before, knew its tendencies, knew how it drifted slightly right at extreme range. 2,800 meters, more than a mile and a half. Uphill shot, wind shifting as the temperature dropped with approaching dawn. And somewhere out there, the sniper who just killed the best man she'd ever known. The machine gun fire had slackened. The assault team was pinned down in the compound, voices screaming over the radio for air support, for backup, for anything. They had maybe 3 minutes before the situation became unrecoverable. Elena found the northeast ridge through the scope. Scanned. Scanned. There, a faint shape against slightly lighter stone. Ghillie suit. Professional work. Hidden in a depression that provided perfect cover and perfect angles. He'd killed Hale from there. From a distance, most snipers wouldn't even attempt. Her hands steadied. The shaking stopped. Something cold and certain settled into her chest where her heart should have been. She ran the numbers. 2,800 meters. Elevation, 42 minutes of angle. Wind, shifting but averaging 8 miles per hour from the west. Temperature dropping, air density increasing. Coriolis effect pushing the round slightly right. Spin drift adding another few inches. Bullet drop would be 73 feet. Time of flight, 3.4 seconds. In that time, the Earth would rotate the target 14 inches to the right. The wind would push the round 32 inches left. Humidity and altitude would affect drag coefficient. Normal humans couldn't make this shot. Normal snipers wouldn't try. But Marcus Hale hadn't trained her to be normal. Elena dialed in the corrections. Every click of the turret was a prayer. Every calculation was a promise. She found her breathing rhythm, found the space between heartbeats, found the stillness that Hale had shown her existed if you stopped fighting and just let the moment arrive. Through the scope, the enemy sniper shifted position. Just slightly, Adjusting his aim, looking for another target, Elena's finger took up slack. First stage, second stage. The trigger broke with that perfect glass rod snap that meant the rifle was ready to speak truth. The Mk-13 bucked against her shoulder. The sound rolled out across the mountains and got lost in the vastness. 3.4 seconds. She stayed on the glass, tracking, waiting. The enemy sniper's position didn't move, didn't shift. For a moment she thought she'd missed, thought the wind had. The figure slumped, toppled forward, rolled out of the depression and tumbled down the scree slope, limp and lifeless and finished. "Hit confirmed," someone said over the radio, forward observer with optics. "Enemy sniper down. How the hell did you?" Elena didn't answer. She was already moving back to Hale, already kneeling beside him in the spreading pool of blood, already pressing her fingers to his neck even though she knew, had known since the light went out of his eyes. No pulse, no breath, no Marcus Hale. Just a body that had been her mentor and her partner and the only person who'd ever really seen her. The assault team fought clear of the compound. Exfil birds came in hot. Medics tried to work on Hale, but Elena stopped them with a look. He was gone. Wasting time on him meant someone else might die. She carried him herself, all the way down the mountain. 6.4 kilometers of brutal terrain, while the sun rose and turned the Hindu Kush into something beautiful that she couldn't see through her tears. Nobody tried to help. Nobody said anything. They just formed up around her in a protective diamond and let her carry the weight of the man who'd made her everything she was. When they finally reached the extract point, Elena set him down gently in the helicopter bay, arranged his hands across his chest, closed his eyes. Then she sat beside him for the entire flight back to base and didn't say a single word. She hadn't spoken during the operation. That was normal, standard procedure for her. Ghost operations meant radio silence unless absolutely necessary. But something had broken in those mountains, something that involved words and speaking and the sound of her own voice. Because her voice hadn't saved Hale. Her words hadn't stopped the bullet. All the talking in the world wouldn't bring him back. So Elena stopped, just stopped. Speaking was for people who hadn't failed the one person who mattered most. Silence was all she had left to offer. Sagefield Training Grounds, Arizona, present day, June 2023, 0600 hours. The high desert morning hit like a physical force, heat already climbing toward triple digits, and the sun barely clearing the eastern ridges. The kind of heat that made distant objects shimmer and dance, that turned the air into something visible and hostile. Elena Thorne stood 30 feet behind the firing line, watching 13 elite shooters fail. They were good. Most of them were great. SEALs and Force Recon Marines and Special Forces snipers who'd made shots that would be classified for the next 20 years. Men who'd operated in every shithole from Fallujah to Kandahar and lived to argue about who was better. But today, they were failing. Spectacularly. The range stretched out for more than 2 miles of broken desert, scrub brush and rock formations, and shimmering heat distortion that made accurate distance calculation almost impossible. At 3,600 meters, just over 2 miles, a standard E-type silhouette sat on a ridge. Steel target, human-shaped, painted tan to blend with the terrain. 13 shooters had tried to hit it. 13 had missed, some by meters, some by less. But in precision shooting, close didn't count. You hit or you missed. There was no third option. The latest miss kicked up dust 60 meters long and 30 right of target. Classic wind drift combined with sloppy elevation hold. The shooter had yanked the trigger in the second stage, letting impatience ruin everything. Master Chief Garrett Voss stood at the primary spotting position, eye pressed to a loopholed spotting scope mounted on a heavy tripod. 62 years old, but built like violence, and experience had been poured into human form and left to set. His face carried the kind of weathering that came from 40 years of sun and salt water and seeing things that marked you permanently. 2 bronze stars on his dress uniform. A Navy Cross he never talked about. Korea, 1952. Chosin Reservoir, when he was 18 years old, and holding a rifle against Chinese human wave attacks in temperatures that dropped to 40 below zero. Then 20 more years of SEAL operations that were still classified. Then another 20 training the next generation. His voice came out flat and professional, but frustration bled through the edges. Wind west at 9, gusting to 12. Temperature 98 and climbing. Mirage severe at all ranges. Bullet drop approximately 82 feet. This is the 13th attempt. 13 of the military's best long-range marksmen. 0 hits. Elena's fingers drifted to her left wrist. Under the sleeve of her worn fatigues, hidden from everyone, a compass tattoo circled the delicate bones. North, south, east, west. And in the center, in script so small you had to know it was there, North Star. Marcus Hale's call sign. The man everyone oriented toward when chaos hit. The man who died 3 years ago in her arms. The man whose promise she'd kept by not speaking a single word during Operation since. Standing beside Elena was Commander Reese Caldwell. Late 30s, naval intelligence, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been sent from JSOC as an observer, and unlike most of the men on this range, she actually seemed to understand what she was watching. "You planning to just stand here watching?" Caldwell's voice stayed low, meant only for Elena. "Or are you going to show these guys how it's supposed to look?" Elena didn't respond immediately. Her eyes tracked the impact splash from the latest miss. Too long, too right. The wind had pushed it, but more than that, the shooter had fought the rifle instead of working with it. Had tried to force the shot instead of letting the physics happen naturally. 3 years of silence had taught her that watching said more than speaking ever could. Finally, Elena pulled out a small notepad and pen from her cargo pocket, wrote in neat, precise handwriting, "They're fighting the rifle. Need to let the shot happen." Caldwell read it and lifted an eyebrow. "And you think you can do better?" Elena's fingers found the compass tattoo again. For just a heartbeat, something dark and weighted flashed in her eyes. Grief that had calcified into determination. Guilt that had transformed into purpose. She wrote, "I know I can." What Caldwell didn't know, what nobody here knew except maybe 2 people buried deep in JSOC's classified personnel files, was that Elena Thorne held an unofficial record. A shot taken under conditions that should have killed her long before she ever touched the trigger. A distance that most snipers considered theoretical rather than practical. 2,800 meters. Enemy sniper. Mountain conditions. While her mentor bled out in the rocks beside her, that shot lived in her bones now. Lived in the way her hands steadied when everyone else's shook. Lived in the silence she'd wrapped around herself like armor. But here, surrounded by 13 elite operators who looked at her like she was a visitor who'd wandered onto the wrong range, none of that mattered. Right now, she was just Petty Officer, First Class, Elena Thorne. The quiet one. The one they allowed on deck because someone up the chain of command had made a phone call. Elena uncrossed her arms and started walking toward the firing line. The air shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. 13 pairs of eyes tracked her movement with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright dismissal. Master Chief Voss lifted his head from the spotting scope. His expression flickered from surprise to something harder, something that looked like a man encountering a problem he didn't want to deal with before his first cup of coffee. "Let the men handle this one, sweetheart." The words came out automatically. Casual dismissal wrapped in false courtesy. This is Tier 1 work, not exactly beginner-friendly. The loudest voice came from the left. Staff Sergeant Cole Draven, 32 years old, Army Special Forces, built like he'd been assembled from spare parts and bad attitude. Tribal ink crawled up his neck. His record said he'd taught snipers at Fort Benning for 3 years. His ego suggested he'd invented the concept of long-range shooting. "Master Chief, maybe there's been a mistake. Draven's voice carried that tone of fake politeness that was really just condescension doing push-ups. This is advanced precision trials. I'm pretty sure Petty Officer, whoever she is, was looking for the qualification course. That's about 2 miles that direction. A few others laughed. Not loud enough for official notice, but loud enough for Elena to hear. Loud enough to make the point. She'd heard it all before, had been hearing it since she was 18 and walked into her first Navy recruiting office. The doubt, the dismissal, the assumption that she was a diversity checkbox rather than an operator. Commander Caldwell opened her mouth to respond, but Elena raised one hand. Stop, I've got this. Voss looked uncomfortable now, caught between ingrained instinct and the recognition that someone with authority had clearly put Elena on this range. He checked his roster again, jaw tightening with each line he read. Thorne, Petty Officer First Class Elena Thorne, you're on the list. He looked up and his discomfort intensified. What I don't know is why you're cleared for advanced precision trials. This isn't public relations. We're testing techniques for real-world deployment, graduate level only. Elena met his eyes, calm, unreadable. Her silence wasn't submission, it was control. 3 years of not speaking had taught her that quiet could be more powerful than any words she might choose. Finally, she pulled out her notepad, wrote carefully, showed it to Voss. I understand the standards. 13 shooters tried 3,600 meters. 13 missed. Time for different perspective. The temperature on the range dropped several degrees. Challenging a Master Chief as a Petty Officer First Class was career suicide. Everyone knew it. The hierarchy existed for reasons, and those reasons didn't include junior enlisted, suggesting that senior leadership needed new ideas. Draven's smirk twisted into something darker. A different perspective? What, you going to manifest destiny the bullet to target? Use your feelings instead of mathematics? More laughter. But it died when Elena's hand drifted to her wrist. When her fingers traced the hidden compass tattoo with a kind of unconscious gesture that spoke of rituals and grief and promises kept in the dark. When she pulled out her notepad again, her writing was steady, deliberate, each word chosen with the precision she brought to everything else. I'm going to do what Captain Marcus Hale taught me. Read the wind, solve the variables, trust the fundamentals, make the shot. Hale's name hit the crowd like a flashbang in a closed room. SEALs exchanged glances. Even Draven's smirk faltered. Everyone in the special operations community knew who Marcus Hale had been. The legend. The shooter who'd made impossible shots look routine. The man who'd trained an entire generation of snipers before dying in some classified operation that nobody talked about. Voss's expression shifted, doubt giving way to something more cautious, something that recognized the weight of invoking that particular name. You trained with Hale? His voice had lost its casual dismissal. Served with him? Elena nodded once. Wrote, Afghanistan 2020, Joint Task Force, Hindu Kush. Something flickered across Voss's face. Pain, recognition, a ghost of his own that Elena's presence had awakened. But he pushed it down, professional mask sliding back into place. That should have ended the debate. Marcus Hale didn't take on students lightly. If he trained someone, it meant something. It meant they were real. But Draven wasn't done. His voice slipped into a mocking drawl that somehow made every word an insult. Oh, you served with him. How sweet. Did you carry his gear? Spot for him? Make his coffee? He paused for effect, looking at the other shooters for validation. Being near greatness doesn't make you great, sweetheart. It just makes you a bystander with good stories for the rest of your mediocre career. The silence that followed was absolute. Elena turned, slowly, deliberately. The movement had weight to it, had the kind of coiled stillness that apex predators display right before they strike. She looked at Draven, really looked at him, and something in her eyes, something calm and lethal and utterly certain, made the bigger man take half a step backward before he could stop himself. She wrote on her notepad with movements so controlled they looked mechanical. Showed it to him, to everyone. I'm going to make that shot. And when I do, you're going to accept that the person you tried to dismiss just outshot you and everyone else here. Understood? Draven's face flushed red. His jaw clenched, but he didn't respond. Couldn't respond. Because something about the way she held herself, the absolute certainty in her silence, suggested that arguing would only make his eventual humiliation worse. Commander Caldwell stepped forward. Her voice carried the kind of authority that came with security clearances and direct lines to admirals. Master Chief Voss, Petty Officer Thorne is here under direct orders from JSOC Nightfall Command. She carries advanced marksmanship instructor certification. She's qualified on every weapons platform in the Navy's inventory. She is absolutely authorized to run this course. Caldwell let that sink in before continuing. Unless you'd like to explain to Captain Vincent Cross why you denied her access, I suggest you let her fire. Voss looked between Caldwell and Elena, gears visibly turning. Long experience had taught him how to read political weather, and this particular storm carried the kind of lightning that ended careers. Better to let her try. Let her fail in front of everyone. His point would be proven for him, and he wouldn't have to explain anything to anyone. Fine. The word came out clipped. Professional. Thorne, you're up. I'll be on the spotting scope, calling it exactly as it is. No favors. One round. Same rules as everyone else. Miss and you're finished. Understood? Elena wrote one word. Crystal. She walked to the rifle. A Barrett MRAD chambered in .375 Shytech. The rifle sat on a Harris bipod with a Schmidt and Bender 545x scope, riding a 40-minute of angle rail. $200,000 of machining and engineering, deadly in the right hands. Elena approached it like she was greeting an old friend. No rush, just smooth, practiced movements built from 10,000 repetitions. Movements that suggested she knew this rifle, knew its language, knew how to make it speak truth. She checked the chamber. Clear. Magazine seated. 5 rounds of 350-grain cutting-edge laser brass, loaded to specifications that most shooters considered theoretical. She slid into the shooting position with the kind of economy that made it look effortless, made small, precise adjustments to the cheek rest and stock until her alignment was perfect. Everything about her movements suggested ritual, suggested discipline refined until it became instinct. Draven stood 15 feet away, arms folded across his chest. He leaned toward another SF sniper and muttered something she couldn't quite hear, just fragments. Something about diversity hires and checking boxes and lowered standards. Elena let the noise dissolve, let it become part of the wind, part of the heat shimmer, part of the environmental data that didn't matter. She'd faced worse, on mountains where missing meant men died, where the wrong call meant going home in a flag-draped box. This was just numbers and physics and breath control. This was what her father had drilled into her on a milk crate in the Red Mesa Desert when she was 7 years old. Master Gunnery Sergeant Warren Thorne, USMC, Desert Storm veteran, who taught her that the rifle was an extension of the mind, who died 4 years ago from Gulf War syndrome, chemical exposure eating away at his lungs until he drowned on dry land. This was what Marcus Hale had refined through 4 years of missions that would be classified until she was old and gray. This was simply who she was. Elena settled behind the scope. The world narrowed, compressed, until everything that existed could fit inside a circle of magnified glass. 3,600 meters away, a steel silhouette shimmered in the heat, barely visible, almost a mirage itself, waiting. Voss settled behind the spotting scope with movements efficient and professional. His voice came out measured, stripped of the casual dismissal from earlier. This was business now. Standards were standards, regardless of who held the rifle. Wind west at 9 miles per hour, gusting to 12. Temperature 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 29.87. Mirage heavy at 2,000 meters. Moderate at 2,500. Light beyond target. Bearing 078. Range 3,600 meters. Elevation plus 47 feet. Elena absorbed every detail. Let the information flow through her mind like water finding its level. Westerly wind meant right push on the bullet. The gusting pattern meant she'd need to either wait for a lull or dial for maximum correction and accept the variance. The elevation advantage was minor, 47 feet over 2 miles barely registered. Slightly flatter trajectory, maybe 2 minutes of angle difference. Not enough to change the fundamental mathematics. She peered through the Schmidt and Bender scope. Maximum magnification, 45 power. The silhouette filled maybe a quarter of her field of view, shimmering like something seen through troubled water. The Mirage told stories if you knew how to listen. Close to the muzzle, it drifted left to right. Strong current. At 2,000 meters, the flow intensified. Heat rising from exposed rock creating violent distortion. Around 2,500 meters, the pattern smoothed out. Beyond that, lighter movement. Hints in the terrain. Brush bending, dust lifting. Elena's mind ran calculations that had become as automatic as breathing. Projectile, 350 grain cutting-edge laser, .375 Chi-Tac. Muzzle velocity, 2,900 feet per second. Ballistic coefficient, .890. Time of flight at 3,600 meters, approximately 4.2 seconds. In those 4.2 seconds, gravity would pull the bullet down 985 inches, more than 80 feet. The round would start its flight on a trajectory that seemed to aim at clouds, only to arc down and down and down until it either found steel or dirt. She needed 325 minutes of angle of elevation. The 40 MOA rail gave her a head start, but the turret still needed to click through 285 MOA of adjustment. Each click precise, each adjustment calculated. Wind was the real threat. 9 miles per hour average with gusts to 12 meant the bullet would drift right. Base windage, 68 MOA for steady 9 mile per hour crosswind. But the gusts added variables. 8 more minutes of angle to account for maximum deflection. Then the factors most shooters forgot. Coriolis effect, the rotation of the Earth beneath the bullet's flight. At this distance, shooting west, that added 2.3 MOA to the right. Spin drift from the rifling, another 0.7 MOA right. Total windage, 79 MOA. Elena's hands moved to the turrets. Each click was deliberate. Each adjustment was a promise. The elevation turret rotated with precise mechanical clicks. 285 MOA. The windage turret followed. 79 MOA. Her breathing settled into the rhythm Hale had drilled into her 10,000 times. 4-count inhale through the nose. 6-count exhale through slightly parted lips. Find the space between breaths, where the body goes still, where the heartbeat slows, where the world narrows to reticle and target, and the mathematics that connected them. Behind her, she could feel 13 pairs of eyes, 13 men who'd spent their entire careers being the best, watching a woman they dismissed attempt something they'd all failed. The pressure should have been crushing, should have made her hands shake and her breathing falter and her mind spiral into doubt. But Elena had learned pressure in mountains where failure meant death, had learned it while Marcus Hale bled out in her arms and enemy fire tore apart the rocks around her, had learned it during a 2,800-meter shot that should have been impossible but became necessary because there was no other choice. This was just a target, just steel, just mathematics. Her finger moved to the trigger, began taking up slack. The first stage came smooth as silk, good trigger work from the armorer. Moving into the second stage now, steady pressure, no jerk, no anticipation, just gradual, inevitable, $20 says she doesn't even hit dirt. Draven's voice cut across the range, loud enough to carry, loud enough to distract, loud enough to detonate her focus like a breaching charge in a quiet room. Snickers followed, low and mean. Elena's trigger finger froze. The shot collapsed. Her world, which had narrowed to perfect stillness, exploded back into noise and heat and the awareness of being watched by men who wanted her to fail. She lifted her cheek from the stock, exhaled hard. Her heart rate spiked. Adrenaline flooded her system. Fight or flight response triggered by distraction at the worst possible moment. She could feel everything now. The weight of Voss's cautious expectation, Caldwell's faith pressing against her shoulders, Draven's contempt like a physical thing in the air. And underneath it all, deeper and heavier, Marcus Hale's ghost watching, judging, wondering if she'd really learned anything at all. Elena closed her eyes. 3 seconds. That was all she allowed herself. In that darkness, she found her father's voice. Master Gunnery Sergeant Warren Thorne, USMC, the man who'd taught her to shoot before she could properly ride a bike. Shooting is meditation, Elena. Silence is control. Words are distractions that get people killed. And then Hale's voice, rough and certain, from 100 different ranges and 1,000 different shots. Ghost, the rifle doesn't care what they think. Wind doesn't care what rank they wear. What matters is the work you put in and whether you trust the fundamentals. She opened her eyes. The shaking stopped. The noise faded back into data. Elena got behind the glass again. The conditions had shifted slightly. Wind settling into a cleaner pattern. Actually better now. Steady 9 miles per hour. No gusts. The thermal layer had stabilized as the sun climbed higher. She adjusted windage down to 77 minutes of angle. Minor correction, but it mattered. At this distance, 1 minute of angle was nearly 40 inches. Getting it wrong meant missing by yards. Her breathing resumed its rhythm. 4 in, 6 out. Find the stillness. This time she shut the entire world out. Draven didn't exist. The watching shooters didn't exist. Even Voss and his spotting scope faded into irrelevance. There was only the reticle. Only the distant silhouette wavering in heat shimmer. Only the cold mathematics of ballistics and the warm certainty of 10,000 hours of practice. Her finger settled on the trigger, moved through first stage, into second stage, steady pressure building like a glacier advancing. Slow, inevitable, unstoppable. The rifle kicked hard into her shoulder. The crack rolled out across the desert like judgment delivered at the speed of sound. Muzzle blast kicked up dust, and the recoil shoved her back maybe an inch before she recovered and got back on the glass. 4.2 seconds of flight time. The longest 4.2 seconds she'd lived since that night in the Hindu Kush. She tracked through the scope, watched the shimmer, watched the mirage patterns, watched for the splash of impact that would tell her where the round went. The target jerked violently. Metal rang with a sound that carried across 2 miles of open desert. The silhouette rocked backward on its stand and settled, and even from 3,600 meters away, the impact was visible and undeniable, imperfect. Center mass, dead center, exactly where she'd aimed. For 3 full seconds, the range existed in absolute silence. Then Voss's voice, stripped of everything except professional assessment and maybe the faintest hint of disbelief. Impact, center mass, confirmed hit. Someone behind Elena breathed a single word that might have been a prayer or might have been a curse. Jesus. The silence shattered. One SEAL started clapping, slow at first, then faster. Others joined. Even some of Draven's SF teammates were nodding like they just witnessed something that rewrote their understanding of what was possible. Elena cleared the rifle with movements automatic and precise. Safed the weapon, dropped the magazine, opened the bolt. Visually and physically confirmed the chamber was clear. The rituals of safety that had been drilled into her until they became reflex. She stood. Her legs felt strange, weightless. like she might float away if she didn't concentrate on staying grounded. She turned to face the crowd, saw shock on most faces, respect on some, amazement on a few, and in Draven's eyes, something that looked like fear poorly disguised as anger. Commander Caldwell wore a grin she couldn't hide. Master Chief Voss looked like the world had tilted beneath his boots, and he was still trying to find level ground. Elena's hand drifted to her wrist, traced the compass tattoo through her sleeve. Marcus, I hope you saw that. I hope wherever you are, you know I didn't waste what you gave me. Voss stepped away from the spotting scope, walked toward her with deliberate steps. His expression was unreadable, decades of command presence stripped of easy interpretation. He stopped 3 feet away, extended his hand. Hell of a shot, petty officer. Absolutely textbook. Elena shook his hand. Firm grip, professional. No games, just one shooter acknowledging another. Where'd you learn to read wind like that? Voss's voice carried genuine curiosity now. That's not something they teach in any standard course. Elena pulled out her notepad, wrote carefully, showed him, Captain Marcus Hale. He taught me to see what the mirage actually says, not what I want it to say. Voss nodded slowly. Something shifted in his face. The resistance, the skepticism, it melted into something closer to respect, to recognition that competence transcends everything else. I owe you an apology. The words came out like they cost him something, like admitting error went against 40 years of conditioning. I made assumptions. Assumptions don't matter. Competence does, and you just displayed yours in a way that leaves no room for argument. Before Elena could respond, Draven's voice cut through, desperate now, loud in a way that suggested panic, poorly controlled. No way. That had to be. There's no way. Wind gusts, heat shimmer, that's a luck shot. Has to be. Caldwell's voice came back sharp as a blade. Staff Sergeant Draven, choose your next sentence very carefully. We all just watched Petty Officer Thorne hit what you and a dozen others couldn't. Unless you have proof of equipment malfunction or cheating, I recommend closing your mouth and learning something. Draven's face turned deep red. He looked around for backup, for someone to validate his disbelief. Found none. Even his SF teammates were looking away, unwilling to attach themselves to his denial. One shot doesn't prove anything, he muttered, but the conviction had drained from his voice. Anyone can get lucky once. Voss's voice dropped to something cold and final. You want her to do it again? The question hung in the superheated air. Voss turned to Elena. Something had changed in how he looked at her. Not quite acceptance, that would take more time, but acknowledgement. Recognition that she'd earned the right to be here through demonstrated skill rather than paperwork. Thorne, you've got 1 round left in that magazine. If you want to prove this wasn't luck, make it count. Elena met his gaze, read the challenge there. Not hostile, honest. He wanted to know if she was a fluke or the real thing. Wanted to know if his worldview needed to shift, or if he could hold on to the comfortable assumptions that had defined his career. She gave a simple nod. Once. Certain. Stepped back to the Barrett MRAD. The rifle was still warm from the first shot, still held her 0, still waited patiently for mathematics to make it speak again. This time she didn't need extensive preparation. She already knew the conditions, already understood the rifle's tendencies, already held the calculations in her mind like a song she'd memorized. This was just execution. New wind values, though, new mirage patterns, the invisible variables that separated legends from near misses, the details that made the difference between good and perfect. Elena settled back into position, found her cheek weld, found her breathing rhythm, found the space between heartbeats where Marcus Hale had taught her that impossible became merely difficult. The wind had eased slightly, 7 miles per hour steady, no gusts, actually cleaner conditions than the first shot. She dialed windage down to 72 MOA. Small adjustment, but it mattered. At 3,600 meters, every minute of angle represented nearly 40 inches. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. The world contracted to reticle in target and the mathematics that bridged the gap between them. Her finger moved to the trigger, took up slack. First stage, smooth. Second stage, building pressure with geological patience. The Barrett spoke again. Sharp crack rolling across the desert, muzzle blast and recoil, and the long wait while physics did its work. 4.2 seconds. Elena stayed on the glass, tracking, watching the shimmer, watching for impact. The target jerked, metal sang. Another perfect hit. Maybe 2 inches left of her first shot, wind variance, but still center mass. Still undeniable. Still perfect. Voss's voice carried a note of something that might have been awe, poorly disguised as professional assessment. Impact, center mass, second confirmed hit at 3,600 meters. The silence broke differently this time. Not gradual applause building, just explosive recognition that they'd witnessed something rare. Something that transcended normal excellence and became the kind of performance that people would talk about for years. One SEAL was openly grinning. Others were shaking their heads in disbelief, tempered with respect. Even Draven's teammates looked impressed, their earlier mockery forgotten in the face of undeniable skill. 2 consecutive hits at 3,600 meters wasn't luck, wasn't a fluke, wasn't anything except mastery demonstrated under pressure in front of witnesses who'd failed the same test. This was the kind of shooting that rewrote expectations, that made people reconsider their assumptions about what was possible and who could achieve it. Elena cleared the Barrett for the second time, stood. Her hand found her wrist again, found the compass tattoo, found the connection to a man who'd believed in her when she was nothing but potential and rough edges. Marcus, you taught me to be undeniable, to let the work speak louder than any words I could choose. I hope this honors what you gave me. A tiny private smile touched her lips, gone almost before it appeared, but present long enough for Caldwell to see it, long enough for Voss to recognize that something important had just shifted on his range. From the parking area, a Navy commander emerged, tall, late 40s, aviators reflecting the brutal sun, command ball cap marking him as someone who answered directly to flag officers. His uniform was crisp despite the heat. His bearing suggested a man who lived in classified briefing rooms and made decisions that never appeared in newspapers. He walked directly to Voss. "Master Chief." Voss straightened instinctively. "Yes, sir." They stepped aside, spoke quietly. Elena watched Voss's body language shift from neutral to surprised to something approaching uneasy. Whatever the commander was saying, it carried weight, carried implications that reached beyond this range and this day. The conversation lasted maybe 90 seconds. Then the commander approached Elena directly. "Petty Officer Thorne, Commander Vincent Cross, DEVGRU Liaison. Need a word. DevGRU, Development Group, SEAL Team 6. The unit that didn't officially exist but somehow showed up whenever impossible needed to become accomplished." She nodded, followed him away from the crowd, away from the 13 shooters who were still processing what they'd witnessed. When they were alone, Cross removed his aviators. His eyes were gray, tired, the kind of tired that came from seeing too much and carrying too many secrets. "I'll be blunt, Petty Officer. Master Chief Voss just watched you make 2 consecutive extreme-range hits. Statistically, that's not something we expect from conventional Navy personnel." He paused. Let that sink in. "So I made a call, reviewed your record, saw the classified file from Hindu Kush, Operation Silent Talon, Spring 2020, the 2,800-meter engagement. The Bronze Star with Valor that's been buried under classification for 3 years." Elena's chest tightened. That operation was code black, compartmented beyond normal security protocols, the kind of file that required clearances most flag officers didn't have. Cross continued, his voice dropping lower. I'm not going to expose sensitive operational history to the crowd. That would violate security and your privacy. But I will brief Master Chief Voss with enough context to stop any more doubt about why you're here. That work for you? Some of the tension melted from Elena's shoulders. He wasn't here to put her on display, wasn't here to turn her classified past into today's entertainment. Just here to ensure that competence was recognized without compromising operational security. She pulled out her notepad, wrote, "Yes, sir, thank you." Cross nodded. "You earned this, Thorne. Don't let anyone tell you different. What you did in those mountains, what you've been doing ever since, that's the kind of excellence we build programs around." He walked back to Voss. A short exchange. Voss's expression shifted multiple times. Surprise, understanding, something that looked like regret, then determination. When Cross departed and Voss returned to the group, his entire presence had changed. The caution was gone. The skepticism had evaporated. What remained was respect earned through demonstrated excellence and confirmed through channels that mattered. Voss raised his voice to address everyone. "Listen up. You just witnessed Petty Officer Thorne land 2 precision shots that exceeded every expectation we had for this range. I've been briefed on operational history I'm not authorized to discuss in detail." He let that statement carry its own weight. "What I can tell you is this. She has real-world extreme range experience. She was trained by one of our community's best shooters, Captain Marcus Hale." Mentioning Hale's name again reinforced what everyone already suspected but hadn't wanted to admit. That Elena wasn't here because of politics or quotas or any other explanation that let them maintain comfortable assumptions. She was here because she'd earned it. In mountains and deserts and classified operations that would never see public acknowledgement. "From now on," Voss continued, "Petty Officer Thorne isn't just another student on this range. She's a resource. Anyone who wants to learn how to achieve what she just demonstrated will treat her with the respect her skill demands." Crystal clear? A unified response. "Yes, Master Chief." Draven stood frozen. Emotions crashed through him, visible enough to read from 30 feet away. Anger, humiliation, disbelief. The ego that had defined his identity for years, cracking under the weight of undeniable evidence. After a long moment, he stepped forward, stopped 3 feet from Elena. His jaw worked like he was chewing words he didn't want to say, but knew he had to. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, stripped of swagger, honest in a way that suggested the admission cost him something. "I was wrong about you, Petty Officer. About everything. That was the most impressive shooting I've ever seen." He paused, swallowed. "I'm sorry." Elena studied him, saw that he meant it, saw that watching her succeed had broken something in him that maybe needed breaking. That sometimes the best lessons came wrapped in humiliation you'd earned through your own arrogance. She pulled out her notepad, wrote, "Apology accepted, Staff Sergeant. We're all here to learn." Draven nodded, started to turn away, then stopped, turned back. His voice was quieter now, almost vulnerable. If you're willing, would you teach me? How you read wind like that? How you stay calm under pressure? I've been teaching snipers for 5 years, but I've never seen anyone with your skill set." Elena hesitated. Draven had been her loudest critic, had tried to humiliate her in front of everyone, had represented everything she'd fought against for her entire career. But Marcus Hale had taught her something important. That holding grudges was a luxury operators couldn't afford. That the mission always mattered more than ego. That making others better was how you honored the people who made you better. She wrote, "Okay, but we do it my way. No ego, no shortcuts. Start with fundamentals even if you think you know them." Draven nodded rapidly. "Deal. Absolutely. Whatever you say." Elena watched something shift in his eyes. The beginning of transformation from critic to student. From someone who talked about excellence to someone willing to learn it. The desert sun hammered down with a kind of intensity that made even breathing feel like work. Heat shimmered off every surface, turning the distant ridges into watercolor paintings that shifted and reformed with each thermal current. Elena stood near the water station, taking slow sips from a canteen that tasted like hot metal and dust. Around her, the 13 shooters were breaking into smaller groups, discussing her shots with the animated intensity of professionals who just witnessed something that challenged their understanding of what was possible. Master Chief Voss approached with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. Not hostile anymore, not exactly friendly either. Something more complex. Something that suggested internal debates being waged behind those weathered features. He stopped a few feet away, studied her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decisions made and consequences accepted. "Thorne, I need to be straight with you about something." Elena nodded, waited. 3 years of silence had taught her that listening often revealed more than questioning ever could. Voss glanced back at the range, at the target still standing at 3,600 meters, at the Barrett MRAD resting on its bipod like a mechanical prophet waiting to speak truth again. The 3,600-meter shots, those were qualification standards. What we've been testing all week. 13 shooters attempted it, 13 failed until you. He paused. But that's not actually the test we're chasing. Something in Elena's chest tightened. Not fear exactly, more like recognition that the real challenge had been waiting in the wings all along. Voss continued. 4,000 meters, 2.5 miles. It's the theoretical ceiling for the .375 Chi-TAC platform. On paper, the ballistics work. In reality, nobody's ever confirmed a hit at that distance. Not in training, not in combat. The variables stack up until probability says it's impossible. He met her eyes directly. That's what we're actually here to solve. 3,600 was the baseline. 4,000 is the standard we need to establish. Because if we can hit at that range, we change the battlefield geometry. We change what's possible. Elena pulled out her notepad. Her hand was steady as she wrote. Showed him, "You want me to attempt 4,000 meters? I want you to hit 4,000 meters, Voss corrected. Because if what I just saw at 3,600 is your normal, then maybe you're the one who can do what everyone else says is impossible." Behind them, Draven had moved closer, listening. His expression had transformed from the earlier mockery into something approaching reverence mixed with genuine curiosity. "Master Chief," Draven's voice had lost its edge. 4,000 meters, that's beyond extreme range. That's theoretical distance. Even Captain Hale never confirmed a hit past 3,200. Voss nodded. "I know, which is why we've been testing it all week, and why every attempt has failed." He looked back at Elena. "Until maybe now." Commander Caldwell joined the group, her tablet displaying ballistics data that made the challenge clear. 4,000 meters with .375 Chi-TAC. Bullet drop approximately 1,247 inches. That's over 100 feet of vertical compensation. Time of flight, 5.3 seconds. Wind drift at even moderate speeds pushes into double-digit meters. She looked up from the screen. The mathematics say it's possible. Reality says it isn't. Something happens in that gap between theory and execution that we haven't solved. Elena studied the tablet, ran the numbers in her mind. The calculations were brutal, but not impossible. Not if you accounted for every variable. Not if you trusted the fundamentals absolutely. She wrote, "What about target setup? Is there a 4,000-meter position?" Voss nodded. "Different ridge. We've got an E-type silhouette positioned at exactly 4,000 meters, bearing 082, elevation difference plus 52 feet. We've had it up all week. Nobody's come within 50 meters of hitting it." Elena's fingers found her compass tattoo, traced the familiar pattern through her sleeve. Marcus Hale's voice echoed in her memory from 100 different training sessions. "Ghost, Impossible is just math nobody solved yet. You solve it by trusting every fundamental, accounting for every variable, and refusing to accept that it can't be done. She wrote on her notepad with movements decisive and clear. I'll attempt it. 2 rounds. Voss's expression shifted. Respect mixed with something else. Something that looked like a man watching his worldview reshape itself in real time. Understood. You'll have full support. Best conditions we can give you. But Thorne, he paused. This isn't about proving skeptics wrong anymore. This is about establishing what's actually possible. If you hit this, you change doctrine, you change training, you change how we think about long-range precision. The weight of that statement settled on Elena's shoulders. This wasn't just about her anymore, wasn't just about honoring Marcus Hale's memory or validating her own skills. This was about pushing the boundary of human capability outward, about proving that the impossible was just the difficult waiting for someone capable enough to attempt it. She nodded once, certain, committed. The group moved back to the firing line. Word spread quickly through the remaining shooters. The quiet woman who'd hit 3,600 twice was going to attempt 4,000, going to try something that existed more in theory than practice. The mood shifted. The earlier mockery was gone completely. What remained was professional interest, mixed with genuine hope that maybe, just maybe, they were about to witness history. Elena approached the Barrett MRAD. The rifle had cooled slightly, but still held her zero. Still waited patiently for mathematics and will to make it speak. She checked the turrets. The 3,600-meter dope was still dialed in. She'd need to adjust significantly. More elevation, more windage, more of everything. But first, she needed to read the conditions. Needed to understand what the desert was telling her about wind and temperature and the invisible forces that would push her bullet across more than 2 miles of air. Voss settled behind the spotting scope. His voice, when he called conditions, carried the professional respect of one shooter acknowledging another. Wind west at 8 miles per hour, steady. Temperature 101 degrees Fahrenheit. Barometric pressure 29.92. Humidity 11%. Mirage minimal at all ranges. Conditions are actually optimal right now. This might be the best window we've had all week. Elena pulled out a small green notebook, worn, weathered. The cover was faded from sun and handling. Inside, pages filled with ballistics calculations, wind charts, and handwritten notes in 2 different styles of penmanship. Her father's writing from when she was young, and Marcus Hale's precise printing from 4 years of training that had transformed her from skilled to exceptional. She flipped to a blank page, began running calculations with the focus of someone who understood that mathematics didn't lie, didn't have opinions, didn't care about gender or rank or politics. Numbers were pure truth waiting to be applied. 4,000 meters, 0.375, ShyTac, 350 grain projectile. Muzzle velocity 2,900 feet per second. Time of flight 5.3 seconds. Gravity would pull the bullet down 1,247 inches. More than 100 feet. She needed to aim at a point in space that seemed to target the sky, trusting that physics would arc the round down and down until it found steel. Elevation needed 380 minutes of angle. The 40 MOA rail gave her a foundation, but the turret needed to click through 340 MOA. She'd be maxing out the elevation adjustment, living at the edge of what the scope's mechanical limits allowed. Wind at 8 miles per hour steady would push the bullet right. Base calculation, 89 MOA for the crosswind component. But at 5.3 seconds of flight time, she had to account for wind variation at different altitudes. Ground level wind might be 8. Mid-flight could be different. High flight path might see 5 or 6. She calculated for 6 miles per hour at high altitude. Reduced windage to 85 MOA base. Coriolis effect at 4,000 meters, shooting west, 3.1 MOA right. The Earth's rotation would shift the target's position during the bullet's flight. Spin drift from the rifling, another 0.8 MOA right. Total windage, 88.9 MOA. Call it 89 MOA for the first attempt. Elena closed the notebook, looked at the numbers she'd written, double-checked every calculation. The mathematics were sound. The physics were solid. The shot was possible. If she executed perfectly, if the wind held steady, if every variable aligned, if she trusted everything Marcus Hale had taught her about pushing past impossible into merely difficult. She began dialing the turrets. Each click was precise. Each adjustment was a commitment. The elevation turret rotated and rotated, the numbers climbing into ranges most shooters never used. 340 MOA of elevation. The scope was now aimed so high that looking through it showed mostly sky. Only when she accounted for the holds and the calculations did the geometry make sense. 89 MOA of windage. The reticle was offset so far right that the target wasn't even visible in the field of view at normal hold. She'd have to use the reference points in the scope, trust the mathematics, believe that the bullet would curve back to center through forces invisible to the naked eye. Elena settled behind the rifle, found her cheek weld, found her breathing rhythm, found the space between heartbeats that Marcus Hale had shown her was where excellence lived. Through the scope at maximum magnification, she could barely see the target, a smudge against lighter-colored rock, a suggestion of a silhouette rather than a clear image. Heat shimmer made it waver like something half-real, like something that might not exist at all if you stopped believing in it. Her right shoulder suddenly flared with sharp pain, the old injury, the separated shoulder from carrying Marcus Hale's body down 6 kilometers of mountain terrain. It flared sometimes, usually when stress triggered muscle tension in patterns that aggravated the damage. Elena adjusted her position slightly, shifted the stock to take pressure off the injured area. The pain didn't disappear, but it became manageable, became information rather than distraction. Pain is just data, she reminded herself. Acknowledge it, catalog it, set it aside. The shot exists independent of your comfort. She returned to her breathing. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. The world narrowed, compressed, until everything that mattered fit inside a circle of glass and the absolute certainty of mathematics. Her finger moved to the trigger, took up slack. First stage, smooth, moving into second stage with pressure gradual and inevitable. Draven's voice cut through the silence, but different this time, urgent rather than mocking. Master Chief, she's injured. Look at her shoulder position. She's compensating. This isn't fair. The observation froze Elena's trigger finger. Not because Draven was trying to sabotage her. The concern in his voice was genuine. He transformed from critic to someone who actually cared whether she succeeded safely. Voss looked up from the spotting scope, studied Elena's position, saw the slight asymmetry in how she'd adjusted the stock. "Thorne, you good? We can delay if you need medical assessment." Elena lifted her head, met Voss's eyes. There was genuine concern there. Not condescension, not doubt. Just a Master Chief making sure one of his shooters wasn't pushing through an injury that would compromise performance or cause long-term damage. She pulled out her notepad, wrote, "Old injury, Afghanistan, manageable, I'm good." Voss studied her for a long moment, weighing responsibility against capability, weighing safety protocols against the reality that every operator in special warfare carried old injuries that flared at inconvenient times. "Your call," he said finally, "but if that shoulder causes you to jerk the trigger, you call the shot bad, and we try again. Clear?" Elena nodded, wrote, "Clear." She settled back behind the rifle. The shoulder still hurt, but she'd compartmentalized it now, made it part of the background noise rather than a crisis demanding immediate attention. 4-count inhale, 6-count exhale. The world narrowed again. This time, her internal voice became clear. became the conversation she'd been having with Marcus Hale's memory for 3 years. Marcus, I see it now. Every lesson, every correction, every moment you pushed me past comfortable into exceptional. This shot isn't mine alone. It's ours. I'm just the instrument of everything you poured into me. Memories cascaded through her mind in the space of 3 heartbeats. The first day meeting Hale at Advanced Marksmanship School. His voice saying, "You've got natural talent. I'll make it supernatural." The 1,000 repetitions. The endless wind-reading drills. The night before he died, when he'd handed her his range notebook and said, "When I'm gone, these are yours. Every lesson." The promise she'd made. "I'll be the best, Marcus. Then I'll teach the best." She'd kept half that promise by being silent, by withdrawing, by honoring him through absence rather than presence. But that wasn't what he'd asked for. He'd asked her to teach, to pass forward, to make his death mean something beyond grief and guilt. Elena's fingers settled on the trigger. The world contracted to a single point where intention and physics aligned. She pressed, smooth, steady. The trigger broke with that perfect glass rod snap. The Barrett roared. Muzzle blast kicked up a dust cloud. Recoil hammered into her injured shoulder. Sharp pain that she noted and dismissed in the same instant. She stayed on the glass, tracking, watching. 5.3 seconds of flight time, the longest 5.3 seconds in her life. Through the scope, she watched the mirage patterns, watched the shimmer, watched for any indication of where the round went. The impact came as a dust splash. 60 meters left of target. Elevation looked perfect. The round hit at exactly the right height on the ridge, but windage was off. She'd miscalculated something in the wind values. "Miss," Voss called. 60 meters left, elevation on target, wind pushed it. Disappointment rippled through the watching shooters. Not mockery this time, just the recognition that 4,000 meters was living up to its impossible reputation. But Voss continued, voice thoughtful. "Downrange observer is reporting something. Stand by." Radio chatter. Voss listening. His expression shifted. "Observer says the target frame shifted position. Wind torque bent the support post approximately 2 meters to the right. Your shot would have been much closer if the target was where it was supposed to be." Debate erupted immediately. Did structural failure count as a miss? Was the test compromised? Elena raised her hand. Silence fell. She pulled out her notepad, wrote in large, clear letters, "Miss is miss. I adjust. 1 round left." The simplicity of that statement carried more weight than any argument. She wasn't making excuses, wasn't claiming the shot should count, just acknowledging reality and moving forward. Voss nodded slowly, new respect flooding his features. "You've got 1 round left, Thorne. Make it count." Elena stood, walked away from the rifle, needed a moment to process, to recalculate, to understand what had gone wrong and how to correct it. She found shade near the equipment shed, sat on a crate, stared at her compass tattoo like it might offer answers. The wind calculation had been wrong. She'd estimated 6 miles per hour at high altitude, but the bullet had drifted left, suggesting the actual wind was stronger, maybe 7 or 8 miles per hour at mid-flight altitude. The ground level reading of 8 miles per hour might have been accurate, but the vertical wind profile was different than she'd calculated. Footsteps approached. Draven. He sat nearby but not too close, gave her space. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was quiet, respectful. Elena looked at him, nodded. "Why don't you speak? I mean, I know it's not my business, but you're so precise about everything else." The silence seems deliberate. Elena considered for a long moment, then pulled out her notepad, wrote more than she'd written for anyone except commanders reading reports. Words failed the one time they mattered. Actions don't. Draven read it. Understanding dawned slowly. "The night Captain Hale died?" Elena nodded, wrote more. "I was supposed to watch our 6. I was focused forward, I didn't call the threat. He died fixing my mistake. Draven read it twice. His face transformed with comprehension in something like shared pain. I lost my spotter in Kandahar, 2019. I was so focused on the shot, I didn't hear him call contact left. RPG hit our position. He died. I lived. His voice was raw. I blamed myself for 2 years. Drank. Got divorced. Almost ate my gun. He looked at Elena directly. My old team sergeant told me something that saved my life. He said, the only way to dishonor the dead is to waste the life they saved. Hale didn't die so you could be silent. He died so you could live loud enough for both of you. The words hit Elena like a physical thing. She'd never thought of it that way. Had spent 3 years viewing her silence as tribute, as penance, as the only way to honor a man who'd given everything. But maybe silence was the opposite of honor. Maybe Marcus Hale had taught her to shoot so she could teach others, had given her his notebook so she'd pass his knowledge forward, had died protecting her so she could continue the work. She looked at Draven, wrote, "Will you spot for me? One more time?" It would be an honor. They walked back to the firing line together, former critic and current student. 2 shooters connected by shared loss and the understanding that excellence was how you honored the dead. Elena settled behind the Barrett for what might be her final attempt. Draven moved to the spotting scope beside Voss. "Permission to spot for Petty Officer Thorne, Master Chief?" Voss looked surprised, then understanding, then approval. "Granted. Work together. Make this count." Draven peered through the scope, called conditions with precision. Elena recognized as genuine skill underneath the ego that had obscured it. Wind west at 7 miles per hour, steady, temperature 102, pressure 29.91, mirage light and stable. Conditions perfect. Target confirmed at 4,000 meters, bearing 082. Elena processed the information. 7 miles per hour instead of 8. The wind had decreased slightly. That explained the left drift on her first shot. She dialed for 8, but reality was giving her 7. She recalculated. Reduced windage to 82 MOA base, plus 3.1 Coriolis, plus 0.8 spindrift. Total, 85.9 MOA. Call it 86. She adjusted the windage turret, click by click, precise, deliberate. Each adjustment was a promise to Marcus Hale that she wouldn't waste what he'd given her. Elena settled in, found her breathing, the 4-count inhale, the 6-count exhale, the space between heartbeats where Marcus Hale had taught her that perfection lived. Through the scope at maximum magnification, the target was barely a suggestion. A ghost of a silhouette wavering in heat distortion 2.5 miles away. The reticle was offset so far from the target due to windage adjustment that she had to trust mathematics over what her eyes told her. Trust the numbers. Trust the fundamentals. Trust the process. Draven's voice came soft through the still air. Wind holding steady at 7. Mirage stable. Conditions perfect. Window is open. Then quieter with genuine respect. "On you, ghost." The use of her call sign by the man who'd mocked her hours earlier wasn't lost on Elena. It was recognition. It was one operator acknowledging another. It was proof that excellence spoke louder than prejudice ever could. Elena's mind cleared. The pain in her shoulder existed but didn't matter. The watching crowd faded into irrelevance. Even the memory of Marcus Hale's death, the weight she'd carried for 3 years, receded into background noise. All that remained was the shot. Pure, simple, inevitable. Her internal voice spoke with Marcus Hale's cadence, her father's certainty, and her own hard-won knowledge earned through 10,000 hours of practice and one night of impossible necessity. This shot is physics made personal. Gravity pulling the bullet through 100 feet of arc, wind pushing it across invisible currents, the earth rotating beneath the round's flight path. Mathematics and will converging on a single point in space and time. I am not forcing this. I am allowing it. I am the instrument through which precision speaks. Her breathing slowed further. Heart rate dropped to 50 beats per minute. The world outside the scope ceased to exist. Her finger found the trigger, rested there for one heartbeat, two, three, taking up slack. First stage pressure, smooth and clean. Moving into second stage with pressure so gradual, it felt like gravity itself. Inevitable, unstoppable, patient as geology. In the space between her heartbeats, Elena heard three voices, her father's. The rifle is an extension of your mind. Trust it. Marcus Hale's. Ghost, the impossible is just math nobody solved yet. And her own voice. Silent for 3 years, but speaking now in the only language that mattered. This is for everyone who said I couldn't. This is proof that excellence has no gender. This is how I keep my promise. The trigger broke with that perfect glass rod snap. The Barrett roared. Muzzle blast erupted. Recoil hammered into her injured shoulder. Sharp pain noted and dismissed in the same instant. The scope lifted off target from recoil, but she recovered immediately, getting back on the glass. Tracking. 5.3 seconds of flight time. An eternity compressed into moments. The entire range held its breath. 13 elite shooters who'd failed this shot. Voss, who'd doubted her. Draven, who'd mocked her. Caldwell, who'd believed. All of them frozen, watching, waiting. Elena stayed on the glass, tracking through the shimmer, through the mirage, through 2.5 miles of superheated desert air. The bullet arced upward, peaked, began its descent. Wind pushed it right. Coriolis nudged it further. Spindrift added final correction. Gravity pulled it down and down and down through 100 feet of fall. Physics and mathematics and will made manifest. At 4,000 meters, the target exploded. Metal shrieked. The silhouette rocked backward violently. Even through extreme magnification and heat distortion, the impact was visible and undeniable and perfect. Center mass, dead center, exactly where she'd aimed. For 3 full heartbeats, absolute silence. Then Draven's voice cracked with pure emotion. Hit, confirmed hit, center mass, 4,000 meters. The range detonated into chaos, SEALs shouting, SF guys disbelieving their own eyes. Even Voss yelling something that might have been celebration, or might have been prayer, or might have been both at once. Elena cleared the rifle mechanically. Safe. Magazine out. Bolt open. Chamber clear. She stood, walked 10 feet away from the celebration, dropped to her knees in the sand, and cried. 3 years of grief poured out. 3 years of guilt. 3 years of carrying Marcus Hale's death like a stone in her chest. The tears came hot and fast and unstoppable. Silent sobs that shook her shoulders. Release that felt like breaking and healing happening simultaneously. Voss approached, knelt beside her, put a hand on her shoulder, the good one, and just stayed present. Didn't speak, didn't offer platitudes, just bore witness to grief that had finally found its outlet. After a long moment, he said quietly, "My daughter would have loved you. Marcus did love you, and I'm proud of you." Elena looked up, nodded, couldn't speak yet but felt seen, felt acknowledged. They stood together, walked back to the crowd. The 13 shooters formed a circle, started clapping, slow at first, then building into thunder that rolled across the desert like recognition made audible. Commander Caldwell was on her encrypted phone. Confirmed, 4,000 meters, first successful hit in program history. Shooter, Petty Officer First Class Elena Thorne. The voice on the other end was tinny, but clear enough to hear. Outstanding. Designate Thorne for immediate DevGru assessment. Also, declassify her Afghanistan record. Captain Hale's legacy deserves recognition. Caldwell looked at Elena. "You're about to become famous." Elena pulled out her notepad, wrote, I just want to teach. Caldwell smiled. You'll do both. Voss addressed the group with the authority of someone whose worldview had been rebuilt in the last hour. Gentlemen, you just witnessed the first confirmed 4,000-meter hit in U.S. military history by a warrior who most of you dismissed. Remember this moment. Remember what real excellence looks like. He looked at Elena. And remember that competence doesn't have a gender. It just has a standard. Petty Officer Thorne just set that standard higher than any of us thought possible. The celebration began to wind down as the desert heat became unbearable. Elena found shade near the water station, still processing the weight of what she'd accomplished. An elderly woman approached. 70-something, silver hair pulled back, wearing a simple dress that seemed out of place on a military range. Commander Caldwell walked beside her, providing escort. Petty Officer Thorne? The woman's voice carried the kind of strength that came from surviving unbearable loss. I'm Virginia Hale, Marcus's mother. Elena's breath caught. She stood immediately, uncertain, reaching for her notepad. Virginia raised a hand gently. I know you don't speak. Marcus told me about you in his letters. Told me about the brilliant young shooter who communicated more with silence than most people did with 1,000 words. She pulled an envelope from her purse. Weathered. The address written in Marcus Hale's distinctive handwriting. He wrote this a week before he died. Asked me to give it to you if anything happened. The classification was only lifted yesterday. Commander Caldwell called me this morning after your first shots. I drove 4 hours to be here. Elena took the envelope with trembling hands. Her name on the front, P.O.1 Elena Thorne, to be opened when she's ready. He loved you like a daughter, Virginia continued, tears forming. Every letter mentioned you, your progress, your dedication, how you were going to change everything. He knew you were special long before anyone else did. Elena looked at the envelope, at the handwriting she'd recognize anywhere, at the final words from a man who'd believed in her when no one else had. Virginia touched her arm gently. Read it when you're ready. He wanted you to know something important, something he couldn't say while he was alive, because he was your commanding officer and it wouldn't have been appropriate. But he wanted you to know. The older woman embraced Elena briefly, then stepped back. Thank you for keeping his legacy alive. Thank you for being the warrior he knew you could be. Virginia left, escorted by Caldwell, leaving Elena holding a letter from a ghost. She didn't open it immediately. Couldn't. Not here. Not in front of everyone. This was private. This was sacred. She tucked it carefully into her cargo pocket, next to her notepad, close to her heart. Later. She'd read it later, when she could process whatever final wisdom Marcus Hale had left for her. The celebration continued, but Elena found a quiet moment alone with Voss near the equipment shed. He pulled out a worn photo from his wallet. A young woman in Marine Corps fatigues, ghillie suit, muddy face grinning at the camera. My daughter, Corporal Kenna Voss. She died 2 years ago in Syria, 27 years old, Marine Scout Sniper, 19 confirmed kills in 8 months. His voice caught slightly. She died because a ground force commander didn't trust her target identification. She called enemy position. He overruled her because she was female, called artillery on wrong coordinates. Friendly fire hit the building where 3 Marines were clearing, including Kenna. Elena took the photo gently, studied the face, saw determination and skill, and the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned their place through excellence. Voss continued, voice raw. I spent 40 years saying women couldn't hack combat. She proved me wrong every day, and I never told her I was proud before she died. He looked at Elena directly. When I saw you on my range, I saw every prejudice I'd built, every assumption that killed my daughter. I needed to know, could I let go? Or would I fail another woman who deserved better? Elena pulled out her notepad, wrote with care, she's beautiful. She's a warrior. You didn't fail her. The system did. You're changing. That's what matters. Voss read it. Tears formed in his eyes. Thank you for giving me a chance to be the father Kenna needed. Even if I'm 3 years too late, Elena wrote, you gave me a chance to keep my promise to Marcus. We're even. They embraced, two warriors from different generations connected by shared loss, and the understanding that honoring the dead meant learning from their absence. 3 weeks later, Elena stood at the front of a classroom at Naval Precision Warfare School. 27 students filled the seats, 5 women, 22 men, the next generation. Draven sat in the back row taking meticulous notes. His ego had been reconstructed into humility that made him a better teacher than he'd ever been before. Voss sat near him as a guest instructor, observing with pride that felt like redemption. Elena took a breath and spoke. First public words in 3 years. Her voice was rusty but strong. My name is Petty Officer First Class Elena Thorne, call sign, Ghost. The words felt strange in her mouth, foreign and familiar simultaneously. For 3 years, I didn't speak because I thought silence honored my mentor's sacrifice. I was wrong. Captain Marcus Hale didn't die so I could be silent. He died so I could teach. She held up the worn, green notebook, Marcus Hale's range notebook, her inheritance. Everything in here I'm giving to you, every lesson, every correction, every impossible shot made possible through mathematics and patience. She looked at each student individually. But understand this, shooting isn't about killing. It's about mathematics achieving moral purpose. It's about being so good at your craft that when the impossible moment comes, you're ready. She paused. Let that sink in. And it's about passing forward what you learned. Legacy isn't what you accomplish. It's who you teach to accomplish more. A female Marine raised her hand, young, nervous. Ma'am, how do you deal with people who say you don't belong? Elena smiled. Not ma'am, instructor. She thought for a moment. You deal with it by being undeniable, by letting your work speak louder than their assumptions, by making every shot a promise that you belong exactly where you are. The class continued, Elena teaching with the patience Marcus Hale had taught her and the precision her father had instilled, passing forward knowledge that had been purchased with blood and tears and nights spent wondering if she was good enough. Later that evening, Elena drove to Arlington National Cemetery, Section 60, where the recent dead were buried in rows that stretched toward a horizon that never seemed far enough away. She found Marcus Hale's grave, simple headstone, rank, name, dates that bracketed a life lived in service. She pulled out the envelope Virginia Hale had given her 3 weeks ago. She'd carried it every day since, waiting for the right moment. This was it. With hands that barely trembled, Elena opened the letter. Marcus Hale's handwriting filled 2 pages. She read silently, but the words burned into her memory. Ghost, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Don't cry, or do, you've earned the right to feel everything. You're wondering if you failed me. You didn't. You never could. Every moment I spent training you was the proudest work of my career. You didn't just meet my standards, you shattered them and built new ones. The truth is, I stopped being your instructor around the 6-month mark. After that, we were partners, equals. And in the last year, I was learning from you as much as you from me. I'm writing this because I know you. You'll blame yourself for whatever happens. Don't. In our line of work, every mission could be the last. But every mission is worth it because we're protecting people who can't protect themselves. That's the moral purpose. My final order to you, teach. Pass forward everything we built together. Create shooters better than me, better than you. Build a legacy that outlives us both. And Ghost, speak. Let the world hear your voice. Silence was beautiful for you, but your words will be beautiful for others. They need to hear what you know. You kept me sharp. You kept me honest. You kept me alive far longer than I had any right to be. Thank you for being the partner I never thought I'd find. Now go be the teacher I know you are. Semper Fidelis, Marcus. Elena folded the letter carefully, placed it in a weatherproof case with the notebook. Both together, both sacred, both passed forward to the next generation. She placed items carefully at the grave, a photo of her 4,000-meter target, whole dead center, the weatherproof case containing both the notebook and letter, a compass matching her tattoo design. She pulled out her personal journal, wrote her response. Marcus, I made the shot. 4,000 meters, first in history. But more importantly, I kept my promise. I'm teaching. 27 students this cycle. I'm making them as good as you made me. Better, if I can manage it. I'm not silent anymore. I found my voice through teaching. Every correction I give carries your wisdom. Every student I train honors your legacy. You live in every shot I make, every lesson I teach, every life I help save through training. Thank you for seeing me when others looked past. Thank you for teaching me when others dismissed. Thank you for believing when others doubted. Until we meet again, North Star, your ghost. She placed the letter weighted by a stone, stood, traced her compass tattoo one final time. Voss approached with an umbrella as rain began to fall. Soft, gentle, the kind of rain that felt like the world was crying with you. They stood together in silence, two warriors paying respects to the dead who'd shaped them. After a long moment, Voss handed her a folder. This came from JSOC this morning. Inside was an official document. Posthumous promotion for Marcus Hale to commander. Navy Cross for valor. Citation that included his training of Elena. And a photo of a wall at DevGru headquarters. A memorial wall. Names engraved in stone. Commander Marcus, North Star Hale. Mentor. Warrior. Legend. Below it, trained PO1 Elena Ghost Thorne. First 4,000 meters. Confirmed kill, 2023. Elena traced his name with her finger, smiled through tears. We did it, Marcus, together. The rain fell harder. They stood together beneath the umbrella, two warriors in a field of white stones, surrounded by the weight of service and sacrifice, and the understanding that some debts could never be repaid, only honored through the living of exceptional lives. Elena's voice was soft but certain. They say the longest journey begins with a single step. The longest shot begins with a single breath. And the greatest legacy begins with a single teacher who believed when no one else did. She looked at the grave one last time. This is for you, North Star, from your ghost, and for every student who'll carry us forward into battles we'll never see. The legacy endures, the mission continues. They walked together through the cemetery as the sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across rows of white headstones. Behind them, Marcus Hale's grave stood silent and honored. Ahead, somewhere beyond these walls, 27 students waited to learn, to grow, to become the next generation of excellence. Elena Thorne had made the impossible shot. But more importantly, she'd learned that the greatest marksmanship wasn't measured in meters. It was measured in the lives you touched, the students you trained, the legacy you passed forward. Marcus Hale had taught her to be exceptional. Now she would teach others the same. One student at a time, one shot at a time, one promise kept at a time. The ghost had found her voice, and the echo of that voice would carry forward through generations of warriors who would never know her name, but would carry her lessons into battles she'd never see, making shots she taught them to believe were possible. Because that's what legacy meant. Not monuments or medals or records that would eventually be broken, but the quiet transfer of knowledge from one warrior to the next, the endless chain of teacher to student to teacher again. The promise that excellence, once achieved, would never be forgotten. Marcus Hale had given that to her. Now she would give it to the world. 6 years later. The record stood for 6 years. 143 precision shooters graduated from Elena Thorne's program. 23 of them were women. All of them carried forward the fundamentals Marcus Hale had taught their instructor in mountains, in deserts, where failure meant death. In 2029, Private First Class Morgan Reeves, one of Elena's first female students, broke the 4,000-meter record with a confirmed hit at 4,247 meters during combat operations in classified terrain. When asked how she'd made the shot, Reeves said simply, "My instructor taught me that impossible is just math nobody solved yet, so I solved it." Elena Thorne retired from active duty in 2031 with the rank of commander. She never sought recognition, never gave interviews, never wrote memoirs. She just taught. Quietly, persistently, with the same silent excellence that had defined her shooting career. Captain Marcus Hale was posthumously promoted to commander and awarded the Navy Cross. His name was engraved on the memorial wall at DevGru headquarters. Below it, in smaller letters, Mentor, Warrior, Legend. And below that, trained Commander Elena Ghost Thorne and 143 others who carried his legacy forward. Master Chief Garrett Voss retired in 2025. He spent his remaining years volunteering at veteran support organizations, mentoring young female service members, and telling anyone who would listen about the day a quiet woman named Elena Thorne taught him that excellence had no gender. He died peacefully in 2033, age 73. At his funeral, Elena spoke, one of the few times she ever spoke publicly about her service. "Master Chief Voss taught me that being wrong is forgivable. Staying wrong is inexcusable. He changed. He grew. He became the father his daughter deserved, even if she never got to see it. That's the real courage. Not shooting straight, but seeing straight." Staff Sergeant Cole Draven left the Army in 2025 and became a civilian marksmanship instructor. He never stopped telling students about the day he watched a woman he'd mocked hit a shot he'd said was impossible. "Pride," he'd tell them, "is the distance between you and excellence. The day I let go of mine was the day I started actually learning." The Barrett MRAD rifle Elena used for the 4,000-meter shot was retired to the Navy SEAL Museum in Fort Pierce, Florida. A small plaque beside it reads, "First confirmed 4,000-meter hit, P01 Elena Thorne, June 2023, excellence knows no boundaries." But Elena's real legacy wasn't in museums or records, or even the 4,000-meter shot that made history. It was in the classroom. It was in the patient correction of a nervous student's trigger press. It was in the quiet explanation of wind reading that turned confusion into understanding. It was in the moment when a young shooter, male or female, it didn't matter, made their first impossible shot and realized that the only real limit was the one they placed on themselves. That was Marcus Hale's legacy, passed through Elena Thorne, spreading through every student she trained and every student they trained after. The longest shot began with a single breath. The greatest legacy began with a single teacher who believed when no one else did. And the mission, the real mission, never ended. It just passed forward, warrior to warrior, generation to generation, silent as a ghost but loud as thunder in the way it changed the world.